Hello everyone, and today we're going to be talking about the usage of Dragon Link inside of the new Link registration event. It's a very interesting sort of predicament because this deck is beyond all doubt extremely powerful, utilizing of course the Borrelend dragon, and in place of the Savage dragon which you normally would have been summoning, you'll instead be summoning the Borrel sword or Borrelo dragons, whichever one you prefer. So while the deck doesn't have its full power from the actual just ranked ladder because you can't use your synchro monsters, it doesn't mean that it's in any way lacking. It can still use its primary boss monster and is able to quite easily supplement itself with some other powerful dragons. So this deck's a bit interesting here because it is definitely very strong. However, it just has a very poor matchup against Marincess. That's where this deck is sort of really falling down, at least in my experience trying to use it. The Marincess trap card making them unaffected, and being able to negate your Borrelend dragon, just making it another 3500 beater. Because again, remember, he can't be targeted by monster effects, but he can still be targeted by trap cards. So infinite impermanence is naturally an out to him, but more relevantly, the Marincess wave is a massive out to this card. It just makes it very difficult to keep it on the field and actually utilize it for its full power. So it's sort of, it does make it a bit rough. The deck is definitely very strong. If you go against anything else, you'll tend to steamroll it quite easily. It's just Marincess in particular it has a rough time with, and Marincess is very popular. So we're going to cover off the deck and how it works. There'll be a deck profile at the end, but I mean, it's virtually identical to the previous deck list. A couple of minor changes, primarily to the extra deck because we don't have synchro monsters, but a full deck profile will be at the end. So if you want to see that, stick around for it, and do watch the gameplay because I want you to understand what I mean when I say that it is a very strong deck. It just is a very poor matchup in this event. But yes, if you want to see more, feel free to subscribe. Leave your comments down below for any suggestions, any requests, anything like that at all, and I'll see if I can get round to it. Again, I respond to everyone who leaves a comment, so please do. And if you want to get speaking to me directly or to other people, you can of course hop into the Discord. The link is also in the description for that. So without further ado then, let's get into game number one and we can start to sort of see how the deck works. Very similar to the last profile, but how it works within the link only event. Already getting into game one here, we've got a decent-ish hand. We're going to go Foolish Burial here off the bat, sending the shooter to the graveyard, then Dragon Ravine. It's unfortunate drawing into Dragon Ravine, but it's fine. Just discard one to send one from deck to grave. Absol Router now is going to search our deck for any rocket monster of our choosing, and our opponent goes for the Maxi. So Maxi is a big issue for this deck. It is very difficult for it to play through. We draw into the Tracer. We're just going to set one pass. Most decks in this event so far haven't been OTK focused, so we're confident in saying we're going to get another turn. Our opponent special summons out Vishuda and then goes into Monk of the Tenyi. A lot of people associate Tenyi with the synchro monsters and Sword Soul and such, but Tenyi themselves are a Link deck. So our opponent's going to go for Ashuna here as well. Ashuna tribute itself to go into a second Monk of the Tenyi. Adhara now is going to special summon itself out. Ashuna from the graveyard is going to trigger summoning out from the graveyard the Shafana. Now Vishuda is going to return our face-down monster back to our hand, and this is when our opponent's going to go into Shaman of the Tenyi. This is one of very few effect monsters in this deck, so at this stage they're of course going to activate their Adhara effect, which is whatever. They're going to go for the Shaman, discard one to summon one from grave, and this is when we're going to go with the effect failure because that Murmur is going to be a core part of their combo. This Murmur is dangerous, so that's being negated. We're not allowing him to resummon it. He's no choice but to go into his battle phase here. He's just going to try and inflict some damage to us while he can. So we were able to quite successfully disrupt our opponent's plays there, and they don't have much of an end board. Of course, we can't just swing into his normal monster because his Shaman protects it. We're going to use Ravine again, ditching the Star Leech for another Absol Router. Absol Router searches our deck for Rocket Synchron. So we normal summon Rocket Synchron, go to resurrect the Absol Router. Our opponent effect failures it, which is a big part of why we did that, because we don't mind getting veilered there. We would rather eat it up now rather than have to eat it later. So our Star Leech then is going to banish itself from the graveyard to add back the Leviania that we sent earlier. That's why we sent it. But our opponent's going to go for their face down trap card, Fist of the Unrivaled Tenyi. Very powerful card as well. So there's two interruptions from our opponent. We're going to go into the Striker Dragon, searching for the Boot Sector launch here, activating it to special summon from our hand the Rocket Tracer. If we had more in our graveyard, we could have summoned from the grave instead. We're going to have our life points to summon Destrudo, Link summon into Romulus. Romulus is being summoned just for its arrows. Of course, we have already used our Ravine. Pop one to summon out the Recharger, to going into Pisty. Like, this is where I discovered in this link event in particular, that's maybe not the play you want to be making here. Instead of this, you should have used the two monsters, used the recharger to go into Striker Dragon, and then after you resurrect from the graveyard, you would use Pisty and Striker Dragon to go into the Delingerous Dragon, which would give you more extension. So small misplay, but again, that just came from the learning curve of the deck. We're going to link summon now into the Borrelend Dragon. Borrelend Dragon negates the Shaman, resummons Tracer. Then this would have had the Delingerous Dragon come back as well if we had done it correctly, but it wouldn't make the biggest of differences because we're just going to swing into all three, wipe out all their monsters, and then attack them for game. So, is it a misplay if you win? You tell me. But yes, very straightforward game. Again, this is going to be the majority of your positive matchups. You just link through interruption. He interrupted us twice, one with a counter trap. You got the effect veiler. So we had to play through several interruptions after not being able to play going first. So not the greatest of starts here, but we were able to really pull it out there in the end. Able to go into our Borrelend Dragon, completely free of interruption, and they weren't able to stop it basically. So once the Borrelend Dragon comes out, typically speaking, that's game unless your opponent has it dedicated out to that card, because it's very difficult to get rid of. As you saw, once it comes out, it's devastating, especially if it's not going first, and if you're already able to attack, you'll be able to completely decimate your opponent. It makes me think that this deck might almost be better going second. It's not. But like at the same time, it seems like it would be a lot of fun to play this deck going second, purely because the Borrelend Dragon being able to just bang, 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 take out all their monsters, inflict a whole bunch of damage. I wouldn't recommend it, but it does seem fun. Either way, that's it for game number 1. Let's get into game number 2. Already getting into game 2 here. We're actually going second in this particular instance. Our opponent goes Reasoning here. We pick Gas level 4 and we hit it just right, stopping that blue Tang, but our opponent wastes no time in summoning out their Sea Angel to search their deck for their Marincess Dive. Now, the Marincess, as I said, is a very brutal matchup for this deck. Very, very difficult one. Marincess Dive summoning out the blue Tang from the deck, sending the Spring Girl, I think that was, to the graveyard. Then we've got the Coral Anemone. We're going to bring up the log here. So the Battlelution's going to equip basically Link monsters from the graveyard onto his monster, which is whatever, we don't really care about that. The blue Tang then checking the top 3 cards of his deck for a Marincess card, which you can then add to his hand. He picks up the Marincess Current, which isn't one you see very often, but it's pretty cool seeing people branch out a little bit. The Spring Girl makes its way back and turns into the Blue Slug here. Spring Girl, of course, activating its effect, and the Blue Slug, of course, activating hers. Whenever she's summoned, add basically a Marincess back to your hand from your graveyard, and the Spring Girl, correct me if I'm wrong, yes, sends a Marincess card from deck to graveyard. So banishes one to summon it, Spring Girl from the hand. These guys have a lot of play, so apologies if I'm not keeping up with them. Into the Crystal Heart, using the Crystal Heart to go into the Bubble Reef. Now, so long as the field spell is face up, this card, because it used the Crystal Heart as material, is now completely unaffected by card effects, so you need to be aware of that. Equips 3 from the graveyard, boosts itself up to 4600. Marincess Dive is being added back to the hand, sets 1 and passes back to us. So again, this is rough. That monster, so long as that field spell is face up, is completely unaffected by other card effects, so we need to deal with that field spell first. They've got the Bazamila, or whatever that is, activating now to boost up their monster even further, so we're up to 5800 attack. We're going to quick launch to summon out the Tracer. Tracer going in the Striker Dragon, hopefully hoping to get some sort of momentum here, but our opponent's not going to waste any time going for that Infinite Impermanence. We're going to go cross out, we're going to banish the Infinite Impermanence. We want to get as much advantage out of this as we can, but there is the Marincess Wave, and that makes his monster officially unaffected by all card effects. Which is very tough. It also negates our Striker Dragon, meaning our crossout really didn't do very much apart from provoking the Marincess Wave. We're just going to have to set one pass. We don't have any further plays. We are not able to use Effect Veiler because it's completely unaffected. Our opponent banishes one, it's going to boost itself up to 5800 again. Marincess Dive, special summoning a Marincess monster from the deck. They just have far too much ammo. The Dive is so powerful, the Wave is so powerful, and then their new monsters grant them so much consistency. They're going to go blue Tang. We're going to banish the one in the graveyard, but call up the grave to stop that from going ahead. But at this point, again, we're just fighting a losing battle here. Our opponent can very, very easily go for lethal. We go to Effect Veiler the Bubble Reef, just again, because we know what's coming. We sort of have given up at this stage a little bit. Coral Triangle comes out. Just look at the power behind Marincess. There's a reason this is the most popular deck in this event. You see this left, right, and center, and it's a brutal matchup. And I didn't want... Oh, there you go, the BM with the Marincess Current. But yes, I know I wasn't properly commentating through that. No, it wasn't exactly the greatest of plays from us. We didn't have a fantastic hand, but just look at that deck. You cannot compete with that using this deck, because you're using a deck that relies upon a big boss monster that wins you the game. When you're playing against an opponent's deck that does that but better, it's very rough. So if you're looking to win using the Borrelend Dragon, if you're looking to win using Dragon Link in this event, you're really going to need to think of a proper counter strategy for the Bubble Reef and such. It may even be worth going second in that regard, purely because you can summon the Chaos Goddess, which will subvert their Marincess Wave's protection, but you're sacrificing a lot of consistency and power for doing so. So it's sort of like up to you. Do you want to guess going second, expecting Marincess? You know, it's a lose-lose sort of situation here. That's enough for game number 2. Let's get into game number 3. Alrighty, game 3 here. We have somewhat decent hand. But there's the Marincess again. Marincess Blue Tank, sending card from top of the deck to the graveyard, going into the Blue Slug to add a card back to their hand, so the Blue Tank would return. Blue Tanks, of course, affect checking the top 3 cards of the deck and grabbing a Marincess card among them. So they check the top 3 and no cards to add, which is good for us then. So that's a -1 there for our opponent at least. Blue Tank gets added back. They can special summon out the Seahorse and then link it into the Sea Angel. Just the consistency and extension off of this deck is insane. Again, I haven't got this deck quite built myself yet, but I am working on it because it is definitely worthwhile. Gonna go into the Splash Mage using the field spell now, resurrecting a water monster, then linking off into the Marincess Coral Anemone. The Anemone then is going to target a Splash Mage in the graveyard, resurrect it, allowing them to go into their Link 4 Argonaut. Now bear in mind they did not use Crystal Heart this time, so their monster is not innately protected from card effects. They are going to have to rely upon the Marincess Wave. They equip 3 from the graveyard, add the Seahorse back to their hand. Then they're going to use Marincess Dive. Look at that, the extension past even summoning out their Link 4. But they're just going to summon 2 and then pass it back to us. They have no further plays they want to make, so we're going to draw, hopefully make something out of this. As I said, they need to have the Marincess Wave to hand to make anything work. They're going to go for Max C here. We know they can negate spell cards using their Argonaut. We're just sort of trying to get through this. If they use the spell card negate now, then they're not going to use it again later. So at this point, we're just going to have to take the Maxi challenge. We're just going to have to try and win this turn. We're going to use Dragon Ravine, discard the Destrudo to send the Absol Rider from deck to graveyard. Absol Rider, of course, searching our deck for the Rocket Recharger. Going to link 1 into the Striker Dragon, searching for the Boot Sector Launch. Boot Sector Launch then activating, it's able to summon the Recharger and the Tracer from our hand completely free of charge. So we get our 2 monsters. We're going to link now into Romulus, of course, just for its arrows. At this stage we drew into the Ravine again. We go to use Destrudo, but they've got Ghost Spell and Haunted Mansion, which is really unfortunate, meaning we just give up half our life points for no reason. We're going to special summon out the Wyvern Burster, use these 2 to go into the Twin Triangle Dragon. The Twin Triangle Dragon, pay 500 life points to resurrect a level 5 or higher here from the graveyard. And then the White Dragon will search for the Black Dragon. Okay, Black Dragon collapse up into hand, resurrect the Absol Rider Dragon here. That gives us the materials for the Link 5 Borrelend Dragon here, which suits us perfectly. We're going to go into the battle phase. Now we're going to activate his effect to negate the Argonaut. Now using his other effect, basically we're just going to swing in, take out his monsters here, try and take them all out in one go. Gonna add the Marincess Dive back to hand. This is when he hits us with the wave. We lose our multiple attacks here, unfortunately, but it does mean our Borrelend Dragon is not negated going into this next turn, so they will have to basically get access to their Marincess Wave again, which may not be the most difficult thing in the world for them. Pascalis here coming out off of Dive, summoning out the Blue Tank from the hand. Blue Tank sending the Sleepy Maiden to the graveyard. The Coral Anemone then coming back out and resurrecting a water monster from the graveyard. The Splash Mage once again. Splash Mage then resurrecting another water monster from the graveyard. Then they link into the Great Bubble Reef, which is again one of their more powerful monsters. They're going to add the wave here back to hand. We're going to preemptively negate the Bubble Reef here, because we know as soon as he has that trap card to hand, our Borrelend Dragon is cooked. So we need to be able to get prevent the OTK here as best as possible. He's going to link 3 now into the Coral Triangle. Coral Triangle then, of course, is going to add a card from, I believe, his graveyard back to his hand. No, a trap from his deck to his hand, apologies. So the Coral Triangle is going to search for a wave, but he already has it. So he's just going to search for, discard 1 to search for another wave. So we know that not only this turn are we cooked, we know on the following turn, we're also not going to be able to affect his Link 3 or higher monsters. It's going to go into Link 4 Wonderheart, which is not one I see very often here. So he's got 3 Link 4 monsters on the field, which is brutal. He's going to boost himself up to 3200 attack. Again, his Bubble Reef is going to continue to activate. It's going to continue to be negated, and that negate is permanent. So long as it's face up in the field, it's not going to go away at the end of the turn. He's just going to decimate our field and then hand it back to us. There's not very many options we have, but we are going to try our best here. Draw into infinite permanence, which again isn't exactly the greatest of draws considering he can make his monsters unaffected, but we have to have a face up monster first for that to work. We're going to go for our boot sector launch. At this stage he is going to try and negate us here. We can't use the infinite permanence in hand because we have the boot sector launch on the field, but his monster was already negated by our Borrelend dragon before, so we can use its effect, summon out 3 monsters from our graveyard. We go to use Destrudo again, but unfortunately it gets negated again. Our opponent really doesn't like Destrudo here. He's really not allowing it to come out at all. So we do have 3 monsters at the very least. We also have the Black Dragon Collapse Serpent in our hand, which we could summon, so that's 4 monsters. Now, we had a few different plays we could make here. The play I end up going for, again, debatably, possibly not the better of plays, where you link 3 into the Nightmare Unicorn here. This is to force him to use his Marincess Wave now, because we don't want to basically allow anything further to go ahead. Now, this may not have been the greatest of plays. The reason being, we're going to link this guy off into a access code talker. We could also have used the Borrelend dragon. This possibly would have been a better play. It would have prevented his wave from activating because it can't be targeted, and it also would have been able to steal one of his monsters. The only thing is it's not necessarily going to provide us the most advantage afterwards. So we're going to link into the access code talker play here. Again, from our perspective, we can stop him from doing very much, but it's just going to hit us with the Marincess Wave. Very unfortunate. The Borrelend dragon may have been the better play there. Again, it's only, hindsight's 2020. What are you going to do? The Borrelend dragon could have potentially reduced the attack and defense of one of his monsters by 500, and then when it attacks, you have the opportunity to steal the monster you're attacking using its effect, and you take control of it. So that may have changed the outcome of the duel. It's hard to tell, but again, you guys tell me if that would have actually made the killer bit of difference. But yes, another tough Marincess matchup. Very, very limited in what you can do there. But either way, let's get into the deck profile. Alrighty. Now, no one's denying that this deck is a whole lot of fun. No one's denying that this deck is very, very powerful in a vacuum. But in this event in particular, this is going to be a rough one to try and climb with. Purely because it struggles so much with the Marincess matchup, and the Marincess matchup is around 24/7. It's probably the most powerful deck in the event. I don't think it's even close, to be perfectly honest. I think Sky Strikers and Sky Strikers sort of maybe come close. I can't think of a ton of outright mega powerful decks, but Marincess is definitely one of them. This is also one of them, to be honest. This is definitely one of the better ones, but it struggles with that one matchup. But either way, we're going to talk about this deck, what it does, and sort of how it's built. First of all, we're going to remove all of the miscellaneous interruption. We've got the double effect veiler, we've got the double max C, triple ash blossom, we've got the Nibiru, we've got the double Culp at the Grave, single Crossout Designator, and double infinite impermanence. So we have room for 12 potential hand traps, which is a really decent number, so that's perfectly fine. You need to play the Crossout Designator, the Call by the Grave, and Ashes purely because Max C exists. That's it. You have to play those. The rest of them you can do whatever you want with. We have a Nibiru in there and everything because Nibiru is quite a threat to the deck as well, so you can potentially cross out a Nibiru, but that's not going to happen very often with Crossout now limited to 1. Okay, so Starting off with our best starter card in the deck, the Black Metal Dragon. Black Metal Dragon, when it's sent to the graveyard, will search your deck for the Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon, so it innately replenishes itself, and the Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon is a +1 as well, so you're gaining card advantage off of it being used for a Link Summon then into your Striker Dragon, which is amazing. So this definitely makes it the best starter card in the deck. You want to play 3 of it. I was initially only playing 1, but I do like 3. It's also summonable off of 1-for-1, which is the main reason this card is so powerful. It being a level 1 makes it a very easy and very powerful target for 1-for-1, which is amazing. Rocket Synchron, you just have to play it. It being a level 1, I mean, it being a level 1 tuner isn't so important in this particular event because you don't have your synchro monsters, but its effect to resurrect a level 5 or higher from the graveyard is particularly useful in this event. Basically, it locks you into dark monsters, yes, but the only non-dark monster you're summoning in this deck is Romulus, really. The rest of them are primarily dark. So his effect to resurrect a level 5 or higher on normal summon is also quite good. It makes him the second best normal summon in the deck, resurrecting things like your Absol Rider, which you will have sent to your graveyard manually through things like your Romulus. So Rocket Synchron's pretty good, plus it's a different name for your Boot Sector launch. Generally a strong card. You've got the Twin Chaos Dragons. You summon one of them by banishing a monster from the graveyard of the opposite attribute. So for light you banish a dark, for dark you banish a light. When they're sent to the graveyard you search for the other one. So light will search dark, dark will search light. Just very consistent way of generating card advantage. Very good searchable targets off of Chaos base. So these guys basically loop and replenish each other, so you're just generating a lot of card advantage through your link climbs. Rocket Tracer we play 3 is your primary link monster, your primary rocket monster for your link plays. You can target a card on your field, destroy it, and then summon a rocket monster from your deck except Tracer. So typically you'll be summoning the Synchron or the Recharger. If you want to make that a little bit more consistent, you can also play an additional rocket monster. Just one more will do to make that effect consistently usable, even if you open up your rockets, basically. So yes, that's his main effect. Him being a level 4 tuner and stuff like that isn't super relevant in this version. It's primarily that effect that allows him to basically pop and summon from the deck that makes him useful. Recharger is just the best of a bad bunch when it comes to the rockets, to be honest. There's his particular interaction is with Striker Dragon. Striker Dragon can target a monster on the field, destroy it, and then add a rocket from graveyard to hand. So if you target itself, destroy itself, to add Recharger to hand, Recharger can then activate to discard itself to summon another Dark Dragon from the graveyard, which is again more relevant in the Synchro version. It's not super relevant in this version. Is legitimately just sort of the best of a bad bunch when it comes to the rockets, so which one specifically you choose for this slot is not really relevant. The Starliege Seyfert, so this guy's really strong. I was initially playing him with 3. I did bring it down to 2 because I thought I was seeing him too much, but basically you discard dragons in your hand and add a dragon from your deck to your hand whose level equals the total level of monsters you sent from your hand or field to the graveyard. Typically you'll be discarding one of your level 4s to to add one of your Chaos Dragons to your hand, so it makes your Chaos Dragon engine even more consistent, searchable. You can also ditch Destrudo or Absol Rider Dragon to search for the other one, so you can ditch Absol Rider to search Destrudo, Destrudo to search Absol Rider, which adds another little layer of power there as well. Especially considering both of these guys benefit from being in the graveyard and also being in the hand. Both of them can special summon themselves from the hand, both have an effect in the graveyard. So very, very powerful there if you manage to open up one of these two with your Starliege Seyfert. It doesn't come up very often, to be honest. It can also banish itself from the graveyard to add your Chaos Levianeer back to your hand, which sometimes comes up. You did see it in one of the games where we had attempted that play to beat out in the gate. Your Chaos Dragon Levianeer, of course, being a very powerful card. Getting back to Destrudo then, basically Destrudo, if you control a level 6 or a lower monster, you can target it, pay half your life points to summon this guy from the grave. It also modulates its level and stuff, but all of that's irrelevant next to just extending an additional monster onto your field. That's pretty much it. Absol Rider has 2 effects. 1, if it's in your hand and you control a rocket, special summon it. 2, if it's sent to the graveyard, search your deck for a rocket monster. So this guy is amazing. I do play him at 2. You don't want to see him in every single hand, but I do want to see him often enough to utilize that special summon effect to at least some degree. And it hasn't, again, I haven't bricked on it or anything like that just yet. I dare say I eventually will. Most people only play this card at 1. I love it at 2. I think it's great. Noctivation Dragon, just a generic extender here. If you special summon a dark monster to a dark dragon monster to your field, special summon this card from your hand, and if it chooses link material, you draw a card. Considering all of your monsters are dark dragons, it fits pretty well. So you're getting the additional extender, you're getting the additional draw, replenishes itself. I mean, it's hard to complain about. We do only play it at 1 because we don't want to see it too often, but it is a very, very powerful extender. So you know you want to see that. Levianeer. Levianeer is again another card searchable off of Chaos Space and can also be returned to your hand from the graveyard by Seifert, so it's not always a bad idea to be sending it to the graveyard off of your Ravine or off of your Foolish Burial. Basically, you banish up to 3 light or dark monsters from your graveyard to summon it, and it gets an effect based upon how many monsters were used for its summon and what their attributes were. So if you only use light, resurrect the monster from your graveyard. If you only use dark, you send a card from your opponent's hand back into the deck, and if you use a mixture of light and dark, you pop 2 cards non-targeting. So really, really powerful here, especially the dark and mixed effects. The light effect you're not really going to use, especially not in this deck, because you don't have enough light monsters to use it in any way, shape or form consistently. But the dark effect, if you're going first, being able to ping a card out of their hand back to the deck is always pretty strong. And then going second, the banishment effect for both light and dark, being able to just remove 2 cards from the field is amazing. He can't attack in the turn he uses its effect, but whatever, you're generating way more advantage off of using it in most cases anyway. So phenomenal card here, very easily searchable off of a few different combinations in your deck, so you definitely do want to have at least 1 copy of this guy in here. And lastly, for the monsters, then we have the Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon. So searched off of your Black Metal Dragon, you banish the dragon on your field to summon this guy from your hand, and then he can summon any dragon monster from your hand or graveyard once returned. So he basically is a free summon, replenishes himself basically by summoning a monster from your hand or graveyard. So he's a bit of a +1, very solid extender, especially considering how easily searchable it is. It doesn't cost anything to search him either, which is great. Foolish Burial, monster from deck to graveyard. You want to be sending your Absent Rider, you want to be sending your Destrudo. In some circumstances you want to send Levianeer if you have the Seifert, but mostly it's these 2. 1 for 1, summons out your Black Metal Dragon by discarding a monster. Again, fairly straightforward. This is one of the best starters in the deck, so you do want to be making it as consistent as possible. Chaos Space, discard a light or a dark monster to search your deck for a light or dark monster that cannot be normal, summoned, or set. That is levels 4 or 8. So it's going to search for either White Dragon Wyvern Berserker, Black Dragon Collapsor, or your Chaos Dragon Levianeer. Those are the cards you can search for. You just have to discard one of the opposite attribute. And if any of these cards here or any of your link monsters are banished, you can banish this card from your graveyard to shuffle the banished card back into your deck and then draw 1. So it's just a very great card for consistency. Very, very few cards are as good as this when it comes to just generating card advantage, so it's very, very strong, very consistent. Dragon Ravine, searched off of your Dragoonity Knight Romulus, will discard a card to send a dragon from deck to graveyard, so you want to be sending your Absent Rider, sending Destrudo. Just makes it more consistent because it's searchable off of your Romulus, which you special summon anyway during your combos, so it's just, you know, you're just plussing cards basically. Boot Sector Launch, searched off of your Striker Dragon, which is the first step of any combo in this deck, will special summon up to 2 rockets from your hand with different names, so very powerful, summons out a whole bunch of monsters. And lastly then, Quick Launch, special summon any rocket from your deck to the field, which is again very strong, and this is one of the main reasons. This and Boot Sector Launch are like the only reasons you play any rockets in this deck, otherwise that you just wouldn't. But yes, that's it for the main deck. It's primarily just around card advantage generation, consistency, special summoning, extending, basic things like that. There's no not a lot of innate interruption here in the main deck. You're relying on your extra deck for that. So that's the main deck. Into the extra deck we've got Pisty. If 2 or more link monsters are pointing to the same zone on your field, Guard Dragon Pisty will resurrect a monster from your graveyard or banish pile to that zone that they point to. So this is part of your core combo as well. To be summoning out your Borrelend Dragon. Striker Dragon, when summoned, search your deck for a Boot Sector Launch, has a second effect, but it doesn't come up in this version of the deck. It's just a Link 1 extender. Works very well alongside things like your Chaos Dragon to get searching, or your Black Metal Dragon to get searching. You just link it off in the Striker Dragon and then get searching your deck, which is great. The Twin Triangle Dragon, which is a monster you don't see in the regular version of the deck. Basically, when it's summoned, you will resurrect a level 5 or higher monster from your graveyard and summon it to the zone that this points to. So again, it's just really strong for extension. I don't know why I don't play this in the regular version. It's a really good card. I might look to see if I can make room for it, but it is just very good for extending that a little bit further. Nightmare Phoenix, pop a card, very simple, pop a back row basically. Dragoon Knight Romulus searches Dragon Ravine, that's pretty much it. It's good for its arrows and it searches Ravine, that's it. Delindrous Dragon is a good extender because when it's in the graveyard and a rocket is special summoned to your field, the Delindrous Dragon can special summon itself out to the field. This card becomes even more important in this version of the deck because the link to arrows are very important. In the regular version, it's not all that because, you know, your extender plays after your Borrelend Dragon are typically synchro based. But in this, because everything you're doing is link based, having those 2 arrows being summonable from the graveyard at any time you want is very powerful. So this guy is pretty important in this version of the deck. IP Masquerena, quick play link summon in your opponent's turn. I never use this card in this deck, to be honest. It's not the biggest of deals. Triple Burst Dragon, it's literally just here for its link arrows and the fact that it's a link 3, allowing things like your access code talker and to basically gain more attack points. It's just a dragon, it's an extender. Its effect occasionally honestly does come up, negating a monster during the damage step, which is weird. You know, it does actually come up sometimes, which is neat. But other than that, it's just here for its arrows and its link rating. Got the Nightmare Unicorn, bounce a card back into the deck, pretty simple. The Borrelend Dragon, so now we're into your 4 big boss monsters. The Borrelend Dragon, so the Borrelend Dragon, it can't be targeted with monster effects, which means that in the Marincess wave matchup, I incorrectly said that this card would be a good counter. It's not, the wave still hits it. Basically, you can reduce an opponent's attack and defense by 500, and if it attacks a monster, you can steal that monster, but it gets sent to the graveyard at the end of the next turn. So it's a good way to get rid of problematic boss monsters that otherwise can't be outed. The Borrel Sword Dragon is an OTK machine, cannot be destroyed by battle. You can change a monster in the field to defense and allow us to attack again this turn, so double attack, and your opponent basically can't respond to that activation. At the same time, if it declares an attack against a face-up monster, that monster loses half of its attack, and then Borrel Sword Dragon gains half of its attack. So it just completely decimates, and considering it can attack twice as well, it is a massive difference that this card can make. It's like a mini version of the Borrelend Dragon, which I suppose they both are sort of supposed to be in terms of its offensive capabilities. Access Code Talker is fairly self-explanatory. Boost up to 5300, pop, can't be responded to. Very simple, straightforward card. And then the Borrelend Dragon, your primary boss monster, cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects, cannot be targeted by monster effects, it can attack everything, it has a permanent negate for a monster while resurrecting a card from your field, which cannot be responded to. This card is very difficult to get rid of for most decks. Unfortunately, the most popular deck at the minute is Marincess, which has a built-in way to get rid of it. So rough. But this card is supremely powerful. If you get it in the right circumstances, it will steamroll any deck, it will steamroll any opponent, but it does take some setting up against Marincess. You need to be smart about it. And lastly, we have the Chaos Goddess, which has a whole bunch of effects, but it's primarily here to give you an option to out some monsters that otherwise can't be outed. You just tribute it for the Chaos Goddess the Underworld Goddess, and you're sorted. It's pretty much straightforward. He has a whole bunch of effects, which are actually kind of decent. It's unaffected by any effect that doesn't target it, and it can negate an effect that summons something from the graveyard, which is kind of neat, but it's primarily here just for its link rating and the fact that it can be summoned using an opponent's monster. That's pretty much it. But yes, that's the full deck. You've already seen the combos. You can see them in this video. You can see them in the last video. They're very similar. So if you want to check that out, go to the last video and get some reference gameplay. But that is pretty much the deck. If you like what you're seeing and you want to see more, feel free to subscribe. Again, it does help me out an awful lot and it doesn't cost you anything. So why not, if you're coming back and enjoying what you're seeing, and leave down below anything that you would like to see, any criticisms, ideas, anything like that you would have. Potentially, if there's something I'm missing about the Marincess matchup, let me know. I could be just misplaying it, I could be doing it wrong, there could be an easy out. Let me know. Like I said, I'm not the greatest player in the world, I'm not going to pretend to be. So if you've got a suggestion, let me know, I'll test it out, absolutely. But right now, that's everything basically that needs to be said about the deck. So I'll see you all in the next one.